Hello everyone. In this video, we will discuss the filter queries in Power Automate, which is a feature that allows you to filter the records retrieved by many actions. Those actions include scenarios where you are reading data from an Excel table, a SharePoint list, a Dataverse table, a SQL database, and other sources as well. In general, Power Automate uses the same syntax for filtering the records from all of the sources, but there are some differences and limitations for a few of them. So make sure to check the official documentation or the Power Automate community forum if you find any issue when using the filter query. For this video, we will work with a SharePoint list that stores data related to complaints received by a restaurant chain, and we will see different strategies to filter the data retrieved from this dataset with a get items action. So here is our data set. We have basically 5 columns here. We have a title column where we have the title of the complaint. We have a description of this complaint. Both of these columns, they are text values. The first one is a single line of text, and the description is a multi-line text. We also have status and complaint type. Those are choice type columns. And we finally have a received at column, which stores the date when this complaint was received. So we will explore a few scenarios in Power Automate, starting by the most basic one, which is retrieve a complaint that contains a title equals to wrong order, which in this case is only this second one. And then we will start to make things a little more difficult. So we will retrieve, for example, all of the complaints that has a status equal to open, which in this case will be those four over here. We will then work with dates. So we retrieve all of the complaints that were received in 2025. So basically we have only 2 complaints here to be retrieved. And then we retrieve all of the complaints that contain the word food into the title. So in this case, we have one, two, and only two complaints to be retrieved in that scenario. And lastly, we will finish with a composed filter query. So we will have 2 conditions to be observed when retrieving items, and we will return all of the complaints that has a status equal to open and are received in 2024. So we have, let's say, 1, 2, and 3 complaints to be received. Having said that, let's now jump back to Power Automate. So here I already have a get items action, and this action is retrieving all of the records from the complaints SharePoint list without applying any filter so far. And if you want to apply filters, we can simply come to this dropdown of the advanced parameters and select the filter query. So as I said before, the filter query follows the OData syntax, and this syntax is pretty straightforward. We just need to pass the name of the property that you want to filter, which in our case is the title column. So I just type title here. For SharePoint list purposes, you will always pass the name of the column that you want to apply the filter to. And the second element of the syntax is the comparison operator. So if you are trying to filter the records for anything that is equal to something, we will use the equality operator, which is represented by this EQ. But you could also use other different operators, and I will let a link in the video description to a blog post where I explore those operators. So after including the comparison operator, we just need to pass finally the value that we want to use to filter those records, which in this case is wrong order. And yes, the filter query is case sensitive. So if you have capital W and capital O for wrong order, you must include those capital letters in your filter query as well. Another thing to do before we move forward is to enclose your value between single quotes. That's because we are working with a string here. The string data types in the filter queries, they are enclosed by single quotes, just like we do in Power Automate expressions as well. This rule is valid only for strings, so if you are working with a number or with a Boolean value here, we would not need the single quotes. So we are good for this first action. Let's just copy this action by clicking with the right button of the mouse and then copy action. And then we can paste it again a few times to represent all of the scenarios that we need to cover into this video. So I will click and hold into this add action button, and then I will type Ctrl V, and I will include a copy of my action. You can do the same by holding with the left button of the mouse and then clicking in the right one, and then you can see this paste action option, and I can then paste action again. And I'll keep doing that a few times just to cover all of the scenarios that you have. So let's select the second get items action. And I want to retrieve all of the records that has a status equals to open. So first thing to do here in the filter query is to change the property that you want to filter. Is not the title anymore. Now it's the status. And let's just double check if this is the correct name of the column. And yes, this is the status column. So let's come back to Power Automate. And here we want all of the records which status is equal to open. So just replace wrong order by open. And yeah, that's it. That's enough. Let's go to the next scenario. And in this one, we want to track all of the records that were received in 2025. It means since January 1st, 2025. So we are now filtering the received at column from the table, and you don't want to retrieve an exact date. If you wanted to do so, we could use this equality operator, but since we want to retrieve all of the records that has a received at date later or equals them January 1st, 2005, we can change the comparison operator to GE, which stands for greater or equals to. Then as the value, we pass the date that we want to use as a filter, which in this case is 2025, 01 and 01, January 1st. And you must enclose this date into single quotes just because dates are actually string values in Power Automate. So we are good for the dates. The next scenario are all of the complaints that contain the word food into the title. And for that, we will work with a little different syntax at this time. So instead of working with the name of the property, the comparison operator, and the value that we want to use as a filter, we'll actually use something like substring of. And this is a function, so we'll pass two parameters to this function. We'll open parentheses to this substring of. And the first parameter is the value that we want to use as a filter, which in this case is food. And the second parameter is the property that we want to check if this food is a substring of. So we just add comma over here to separate the two parameters, and we add the name of the second parameter, which in this case is title. Something important here is that all of the properties, they are not enclosed between single quotes because they are not actually strings. They are just properties from an object, which in this case is the SharePoint list record. And then we can go to our last scenario, which is retrieve the record that has a status equal to open and was received in 2024. So we can repeat the logic from the second scenario. So status equals to open. And now I can use an operator to concatenate this second condition into the same filter query. This operator can be an AND or an OR in this case. But since you want to return only the records that matches these two conditions, the status is equal to open, and the complaint was received in 2024, we will use the AND operator. And now we can include the second condition, which in this case is the received at lower or equal in this case, and then we can open the single quotes again, 2024, December 31st. Now let's quickly rename these actions just to make it easy to understand when we run the flow. So I'll just put this one conditions, this one substring, then this one is the received at, this one is the status, and this one's the basic one, we just title. Okay, we can now save our flow. The flow is now saved. Let's open the previous page into a new tab. It's basically the flow details page. And now we can run the flow. Click continue, run the flow. And yes, the flow ran. Let's check the flow ran details. And the flow ran successfully, as you can see from here. For the title, we can check here the raw outputs, and we received only one record. Yeah, that's correct. And this record contains the title equals to wrong order. That's fine. For the second one, we received a few records here, so all of them must have the property status equal to open. Let's check. Yep, this one has open, open, and open. We don't have anyone with property status equals to answer, so it's fine. The query worked properly. Now for the received at, let's check the outputs. And here we must have everything in 2005. So let's check the received at property. Yes, we have only two records, and both are later than or equal to January 1st, 2005. It's correct. For the next one, we are working with a substring, and here we want to retrieve all of the records that contain the word food into the title. So let's, from the property here, overcooked food, and code food, only 2 records, that's fine, and we don't have anything that doesn't contain food into the titles. And finally, we have the get items with 2 conditions, and here we must have only records that has status equal to open, like this one, and were received on 2024, so before or on December 31st of 2024. We have this record here, and we have this other one as well. So the packing received at November, and it has a status of open. So yeah, we also have a record here, also if the status equals to open, and I received date in November of 2024. So as you can see, the queries worked properly, and this is how you filter records from various data sources in Power Automate. As I mentioned before, you can replicate the same logic from here to Excel records, to Dataverse records, to SQL records, and many others as well. So let me know what you think about this video. Check the links into the description, and see you in the next one.